What's going on, bottom line viewers? It's Mitch here, live. I decided to go live. Everybody's wanting me to go live, so let's answer some NFL questions for the 2022 NFL season. I'm completely stealing this idea from Pro Football Focus, so shout out to the PFF NFL podcast. I stole this idea, thought it was a great idea, and said, this is a way to get some of the subscribers and the Discord involved in the live streams, as well as the channel and the content. So, hey, it's a great idea. Let's run with it. The idea is 32 teams in the NFL, 32 questions. So I'm going to answer one question about every NFL team. And where you guys come in is we are going to incorporate the live element into this as well, right? So if you are here live, I don't have questions for a number of teams. So once we run out of questions that have been sent in by people through YouTube or Discord, because I quickly did this and ran through it, and thank you to Turtle who got all the questions together. You guys are going to ask the questions. It doesn't have to be your favorite team because there will be some people, without a favorite team, whatever. So we're just going to run it that way. Appreciate everybody joining here live in the comment section. Let's pull it up real quick and see who's in there. So what's up, Monty? What's up, T-Bone? How you doing? Anthony says, when will my Cardinals finally win a Super Bowl? I guess that could be the Cardinals question. We'll get to that soon. Thank you, Monty, for joining the chat. Mr. Singh, Lenny B is in the chat. Turtle's in the chat. Jermari is in the chat. Shout out to you guys. Thank you for joining. And don't forget to Gronk Spike the like button. Apologize if my lights are flickering. I don't really know what's wrong with them today. But we're going to get through it anyways. So let's get to it. And let's begin with the questions from Turtle on the Discord. He says, what players do you see breaking out for the Saints? So I've actually seen many of these questions are breakout questions, which is interesting. And I may actually end up doing a breakout video entirely about all the players that could break out, one player for every team. I'm probably going to do that at some point. So stay tuned for that. But just to answer this question, who's a breakout player for the Saints? That one's interesting. That's tough. I haven't thought about this. This is on the spot. So offensively, I don't know if you would include rookies as breaking out. Like, I don't think you could say Chris Olave because he's never played. So I don't know if you can really go there. And besides him, maybe you go to the offensive line. But again, like, all of these players have kind of been established. Jameis Winston, I guess you could go with him if you feel strongly. Defensively, I think that's the side of the ball that you have to go to. But they have a lot of veteran players. I think if there's one breakout player, I think it could be like a Debo, or it could be like, see, they have a lot of vets across the board. I mean, has Marcus Davenport already broken out? If you don't think he's broken out already, maybe you go with Marcus Davenport on the defensive line. Maybe you go with Peyton Turner on the defensive line. That's a potential breakout, I guess. That's really tough. I mean, a lot of their players are already pretty well established, or we already know how good they are or how bad they are or whatever. So the Saints are actually a really tough team because they don't have many young players in their second or third years that are going to be breaking out this year. It's rather like they're rookies playing a big role, or they're already on the team and they're pretty well established. So that's a tough question, so I'll have to think about that one. But if I had to answer that fully, I would probably just go with Marcus Davenport fully breaking out, playing all 16 games, and establishing himself as a top pass rusher in the NFL. So that would be my pick. What are the X factors for the Saints to not only make the playoffs, but make a run? So the X factor, first and foremost, is Jameis Winston. How good can Jameis Winston be this year in this offense and for this team? If he's a good quarterback for them, then we're looking at potentially a team that can pull off a lot of wins this season, upset a lot of teams this season, and potentially even make a dark horse type of run in the playoffs. If Jameis Winston lives up to the potential of being the first overall pick, and some of the moments we've seen from him in Tampa Bay, we know he has the talent. If he can be consistent and piece it all together, obviously it comes down to the quarterback. But otherwise, Michael Thomas's health is a big X factor. Alvin Kamara being on the field an X factor. But I'm going to say one of the answers is going to be Trevor Penning, the new left tackle for the Saints, taking over for Teron Armstead at left tackle. That is going to be a big task, right? This is a rookie who's coming in to replace one of the best left tackles in the NFL, so he has to live up to the billing of early in his career of being a good football player. If that does not take place, it's probably unlikely that this offense sees the same success in pass protection, is able to protect Jameis to allow him to have the time to make plays because he's a guy that likes to hold on to the football, and then offensively running the ball, opening up those holes for the running game. So I'm going to say that Trevor Penning as a rookie is going to have a big impact, bigger than even Chris Olave in my opinion, because I feel like if Olave doesn't live up to anything, okay, whatever, you still got Michael Thomas, you still got Alvin Kamara, you still got the trickery of Taysom Hill, you still got, other playmakers, Harris, that can make up for it, Callaway, that can make up for it. So it's not necessarily like you need Chris Olave to hit right away. That's kind of like a bonus in my opinion. So I would go with Penning. So thank you, Turtle, for his questions. Next up, we've got Jermari, who says another Saints question. We got back-to-back-to-back Saints questions. This was only supposed to be one question, but because we have so many Saints fans, I'm going to continue to answer them. He says, do the Saints have the top defense with the additions that they've added? So I'm going to not spoil that and give you the answer here. I'm just going to say that I'm going to be doing my defense ranking soon, and the Saints will certainly be high on the list. So I answered 3 questions there, sort of. Jim Thorpe, the Jim Thorpe stan himself. We've got Lenny B. Says, what are your thoughts on the Raiders' organizational turnaround in 2019 through 2022? After 20 years of crap, they feel actually competent in the matter of only 3-4 years. So I would say, Lenny, that we haven't fully seen the turnaround just yet. I do think we're about to see the turnaround under Josh McDaniels and this new regime. I think a lot of what you're saying has actually taken place because of the move to Las Vegas. I don't know what it is about the Raiders, but ever since they moved to Las Vegas, they seem like a more competent, competitive football team. Maybe it's the market, maybe it's the money that's infused into that organization, but it just feels like they have a bigger, more willing to win right now. Like they want to win. Okay? That's what it feels like to me with the Raiders. When they were in Oakland the last 20 years, it just felt like they were a Class B, C organization. They weren't in a strong financial situation city-wise. The stadium sucked. You go to Las Vegas, the facilities are top-notch, the stadium's amazing, the fan base is incredible, the buzz is there, the primetime outings are there, everything kind of adds up. Obviously, they had a ton of draft picks, which infused talent, but also they missed on a lot of draft picks. I think Derek Carr has been able to take this next step the last couple of years, which has really been the biggest thing I've noticed about the Raiders, is they actually have a culture and a leader that is evident, and that's Derek Carr. And I think this will continue with Josh McDaniels. And they've had some nice players break out like Max Crosby, and Hunter Renfrow, Darren Waller, these guys just being good football players. That obviously helps. They didn't have a lot of good football players coming from that building, over the years. So they had to go outside of the building to find those players. Thank you guys for joining. What's up, Sing? What's up, Sideline Report? I haven't done the Packers yet, so if you'd like to ask that question. Harleen's in the chat. What's up? How you doing? If you guys haven't already, make sure you do. Gronk spike the like button. Hopefully the lights are all right now. Okay, next, we've got Bethel, who says, do the Steelers have the most underrated wide receiver room in the league? I don't think so, and maybe I'm biased, but I do think it's actually the Patriots, to be honest with you, especially when considering where they go in fantasy. The first Patriots receiver doesn't get picked until like round 10, and I think it's Jacoby Myers, who I don't even see being a huge player for them this year, which has been evident in camp. So maybe I'm biased there. I do think the most underrated receiver room in the league is the Patriots, with Parker, Bourne, Aguilar, Thornton, the second round pick, and Myers. I mean, that's a pretty solid deep room. I think the Steelers are pretty good, but I think they're pretty well regarded as pretty good. I don't think a lot of people consider them to be bad by any means. I think that a lot of people consider, the Patriots receivers to be bad, which I don't think is true. I think, I don't think many people think that the Steelers receivers are bad. I think everybody knows Deontay Johnson is good. Maybe they underrate him a little bit as being a top 15, top 20 receiver, but Chase Claypool, I feel kind of disappointed with what he's brought to the table. Maybe he can have a better year this year with a quarterback who can sling it down the field a little bit better. So I look at him as a guy in fantasy that I feel like maybe he's a post-hype sleeper, as somebody that a lot of people thought was going to break out last year. But this year, maybe he takes a bigger step forward. Pickens is interesting, has a lot of upside as a rookie, but we don't really know. And that's really where the Steelers receiver room comes in, right? A lot of the players are rookies. They're young players, right? So Pickens, Calvin Austin, who they drafted, these guys, we have no idea what they are, right? So it's really hard to answer that question whether or not they're underrated. I would say Deontay Johnson's underrated. Chase Claypool is very well known, so there's no real underrating him there, because I feel like he's a pretty big celebrity in the league despite the production that he's brought, at least with a certain age group, certainly the TikTok demographic there. Ultra says, can the Falcons secondary be a top 10 unit? That would be my question to Mitch. Thank you, Ultra, for the question. Thank you, Bethel, by the way. Ultra, I would say that that's going to be tough to pull off, just because you're going to have to separate the secondary from the pass rush. And I think it's very difficult to have a top 10 secondary when your pass rush is one of the worst pass rushes in the NFL, arguably the worst in the NFL. So it's really difficult for a secondary to play that amazing. I will say that they have one of the best cornerback duos in the NFL with Terrell and Casey Hayward. Outside of that, I'm not really sure what we're getting. I feel like the safeties could take a step forward. The young guys that they have, I like Grant quite a bit. I feel like he maybe could take a step forward. I think Isaiah Oliver as a nickel corner is a bit underrated as well, and he could have himself a nice season if he can stay healthy. So I'll say that the unit itself is underrated and could be maybe overlooked this year, but as an overall top 10 unit, it's going to be difficult for them to produce that way with the pass rush being so despicably awful. So I'm going to say probably not, but there's upside with that unit if some of the young guys can come through. We've got back-to-back Atlanta Falcon questions here. Traffic Cone says, my question to Mitch is about my Falcons. What, if anything, about the Falcons excites you or gives you optimism for them this year or the future? The biggest thing that excites me about the Atlanta Falcons this year is Drake London. I think a lot of people, despite his draft status, are actually sleeping on what Drake London could bring to this team. I think there's something to be said about what he was in college. He was a very productive player in sort of a limited sample size due to the injury in the final season, but he was an absolute target hog, and I've been drafting him left and right on UNDERDOG right now because I feel like he goes in a great sweet spot. I could see him and Pitts just dominating the targets there. I could see Drake London being a very good rookie receiver this season. I think he could have a great season and be up there for the rookie of the year conversation, given that the quarterbacks aren't really relevant this year. So if I'm looking at anything, it's probably, what does Drake London give us? Does he give us an alpha number one wide receiver to complement Kyle Pitts for the future of this offense and for the future of our quarterback position? Because if you have a great receiver and you have a great tight end, it's going to help you bring in a young quarterback and make them a lot more secure and confident and comfortable. So I would look at Drake London as being the exciting element. Secondly, I think the big question for them is looking at the coaching staff and how they improve or change this year with Arthur Smith and Dean Pease, because I think they're going to be on a little bit of a hot seat. Obviously, they're rebuilding. They don't have their quarterback really yet, unless that's Desmond Ridder, which I don't think it is, unfortunately. So that's really the kind of the questions I'm looking at. Drake London does excite me, though. Next, we've got the Real Aqua, who says, from the best BLV Bengals fan, who is your pick to break out with the Bengals? So my pick to break out with the Bengals is, let me think about that for a second. I haven't thought about it. So Offensive line wise, I guess you could potentially have a breakout, but it's weird to name an offensive lineman as a breakout player. Like, is Alex Kappa going to be the breakout player for the Cincinnati Bengals? But also with the breakouts, I typically look at players that have already been on the team, right? So obviously Joe Mixon has broken out. Obviously Joe Burrow has broken out. Obviously Jamar Chase and T. Higgins have sort of already broke. T. Higgins maybe could still be considered a breakout, I guess, but Jamar Chase and those guys have been broken out. The tight end is Hayden Hurst. I don't think that's going to happen. So you look at the defensive side of the football, and I mean, this is tough. This is really tough. I feel like it's because, again, they had such a great season last year that I feel like everybody that needed to break out broke out. I guess, is it Daxton Hill, the rookie? Maybe. I don't know if you can include that. Maybe one of the rotational defensive players, like on the defensive line. Let me just take a look at their depth chart real quick. I want to give you a good answer, so let's take a look. Jermaine Pratt is one that's kind of interesting to me. The linebacker. Chidobe Awuzie is kind of is what he is. You know who I'm going to go with, actually? I'm going to go with the rotation pass rusher. Let's go with Joseph Osai, I believe is how you pronounce his name. I remember watching him in the preseason last year, and he really flashed. He missed all of last season, but that could be a guy that kind of enters that rotation and becomes a difference maker for them. So maybe it's kind of a minor breakout, but he's somebody to look at on the defensive side of the football as a second-year, third-year type of guy that could break out. Thank you, Aqua, for the question. Monty says, Monty be moving. He says, question for Mitch about the Pats. What are your expectations for Tyquan Thornton? Do you think he will be involved in the game plan? And do you think he will work out with the Patriots? So from what I've heard and what I've seen, and I've kept obviously a close eye on my team's training camp, the Patriots, seems like Tyquan's been pretty good in training camp so far. Not amazing or anything like that. But, I mean, the biggest standout has been Devontae Parker. But Tyquan Thornton has been looking like an NFL receiver early, which a lot of people thought he was going to be, sort of a developmental guy. Obviously, he has the speed. He was the fastest receiver at the combine, fastest receiver in the draft. I do think he'll work out. And something that does make him interesting to me with the combination of him and Mac Jones is he is built a lot like Devontae Smith. If you actually look very closely at Tyquan Thornton and you look at his profile of being a speed guy who has kind of long arms, he's kind of skinny, right? But he has like long arms, like abnormally long arms and long limbs, but he's skinny and he's like really fast. It kind of fits what Devontae Smith was for Mac Jones at Alabama. Maybe not quite the refined, well-rounded route runner, but does have that extra gear of speed that he could bring to the offense. Personally, a lot of Patriots reporters are thinking that he might be, very kind of like almost a red shirt guy this year that they've done in the past with running backs. But I do feel like they're going to keep him active and they're going to involve him very in specific roles. Maybe by the end of the season, he becomes more of a starter, but I feel like early in the year, they're going to have him out there a few times a game, and he's going to run some of these vertical plays, especially from the slot. I could see him, being just a threat for the defense to deal with because of his speed, and I would try to work him into the slot, running, vertical crossers and things like that, because then it allows him an easier release, being that his flaw is that he's a little bit smaller and it's going to be tough for him to get off press early in his career because he's not that built, right? So I would say we'll see what he gives us in preseason, but so far from what I've seen, he looks really smooth. He looks really fast, really athletic, has good hands. I think he could be good. Potentially a slept-on pick for the Patriots there. We'll see what happens, but he's promising for the future. I wouldn't expect a ton this year, though. Then Monty asks a couple more questions here. He's got one for the Jets and one for the Patriots. He says, do you think the Patriots could have the best defense in the NFL? This is a no for me, but the reports have been pretty good out of camp for the secondary, potentially being a little bit underrated, because I know that's a big question for a lot of people for New England is how will the secondary be post J.C. Jackson? They drafted a couple guys in Marcus Jones and Jack Jones. They brought in a couple veterans, Malcolm Butler, Terrence Mitchell, the safeties. Bledsoe's been a guy from last year. They picked him. He's been a standout for them. I mean, I still think they're going to be a good defense. Like, I don't think they're going to be a bad defense. They've got Bill Belichick. He's calling the plays. He's scheming it up. He's doing his thing. They're going to be a good defense. There's no doubt. I don't think they'll be the best defense. I thought they had a good opportunity last year to become that if they had Stephon Gilmore and Jonathan Jones in there. And they were still close without those guys. But not this year. I see them being more of like a top 15, top half unit that's well coached, but not necessarily the reason this team wins. I feel like it's going to be a very balanced team leaning towards more. The reason if they win games is because of Mac Jones this year, I feel like. So there we go. Monty says, what is your thoughts on the Jets' ceiling? Do you think they could replicate a season like the Bengals did last year? I think that comes down to what you think and what you think's going to happen with Zach Wilson. Personally, I don't think Zach Wilson is going to have a huge Joe Burrow-like season, and I think that's unfair to say, seeing as how that's very unique what Joe Burrow did. And then on top of that, you know, Joe Burrow had Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd. I mean, I like the Jets receivers and stuff like that, but that's not what they got here. On top of that, Zach Wilson's a lot younger than Joe Burrow. You know, I think one of the more underrated things about the Bengals last year was how old Joe Burrow is. Joe Burrow is older than me. So Joe Burrow, you know, was kind of a more mature guy entering the NFL. Zach Wilson is, not that old. So he still has time to develop, in my opinion. And I like the skill set for Zach Wilson, but you know, there's similar questions about the coaching staff. Last year's Bengals, this year's Jets. Like, there's similar questions in terms of I didn't really believe in the Bengals coaching staff, which that is the reason I didn't believe in the Bengals last year, because I saw everything there for them to be successful, except for the offensive line, which they were able to overcome. It really came down to the coach. So for me, I think the big thing with the Jets is they will have to be lucky like the Bengals were, right? Because when you look at the Bengals, what happened in their division? Lamar Jackson got hurt, first and foremost. Baker got hurt, secondly. Ben fell off a cliff. So the Bengals were able to take real opportunity there and strike while they had elite talent. The Jets have good talent, but they're in a really tough division. They play a really tough schedule. I just don't see it happening this year for them. Maybe next year could be the year, and I think if I see the right signs from Zach Wilson, I might jump on that bandwagon next year. But this year, with the way the Dolphins went all in this offseason, with the Patriots having Belichick, I think Mac takes a big step forward. And with the Bills being the best team in the AFC or the NFL, it's just going to be really tough for the Jets to make that jump. Unless you see the Dolphins sucking or the Patriots sucking or Josh Allen getting hurt or something crazy happening. I just don't see it. They have potential in their roster. I do agree. I think they'll be a pain in the butt for teams. I just don't see it all coming together this year. I think what the Bengals did was very unique. So those are the questions from the Discord. We're going to start getting questions from the live chat, as well as I'm going to take a look at the YouTube community tab. So if you guys have questions about your team or any team in general, let me know in the live chat. Let's keep this thing rolling and keep this thing going. So let's begin with the YouTube community tab. We have from Sideline Report. Thank you for joining live, by the way. He says, do you believe the Green Bay Packers will continue to win 13 games for a fourth straight season? Personally, I don't see that happening. I have projected the Packers for 11 wins this year, still remaining first in their division, and a top 3 seed in the NFC. But 13 wins is going to be tough to pull off, and it's because that reliable number 1 receiver that Aaron Rodgers had and the chemistry that he had in the big moments, in the last minutes of games, in the big swing plays in games, third downs, red zone, all that stuff. He doesn't have the Devontae Adams, and if he does end up developing a connection with a number one receiver, it's going to take time. So I feel like the Packers are going to be maybe a team that has to rely more on their running game this year, more on their defense this year, and that's going to be the way that they try to win, with Aaron Rodgers becoming not necessarily a game manager, but he's going to have to do his best of managing the game and making the plays when they're there, and understanding that the team's strength is not in the passing game, but in other areas. So Aaron Rodgers can certainly do that, as Tom Brady has shifted his mindset many times to do that as well. So I see Aaron Rodgers taking that approach this year, where it's maybe not, they're just not going to be as explosive, which lends teams to hang around in games, which makes the games closer, which makes it more likely that they get upset. So in my opinion, I didn't feel they were as good as their record indicated last year. That showed up in the playoffs. I feel like they're about 11 wins this season, and I think that's pretty accurate. If they were to get to 13, would I be absolutely shocked? No, but I think, the Vikings would have to be worse than I expect them to be. The Lions would have to be worse than I expect them to be. That sort of thing for the Packers to replicate that, because I thought they also played in a really weak division last year. Then we've got Odd Big King, who says, how good do you think Matt Ryan will be in the Colts offense? I think Matt Ryan is going to have his best season over the last 3 or 4 seasons. I feel like Matt Ryan is going to be pretty darn good in the Colts offense. The reason I say that is the Colts, Frank Reich specifically, he does a really good job of scheming up pass plays. There's a number of times the last couple of seasons where I've seen easy, big chunk plays that Frank Reich creates with his scheme. And I think Matt Ryan, he just doesn't miss. This is a guy, he's super consistent. He doesn't miss layups. If it's there for him, he's going to make the throw. Matt Ryan, I think something very underrated about him as well is his ability to maneuver the pocket and kind of maneuver messy situations in terms of blitzing, in terms of pass rush, and be able to manipulate that and get around it and make throws into tight windows. He doesn't have the strongest arm anymore, but he can still be very pinpoint. He's also very good in 2-minute situations. He's very good and smart, in terms of managing the game. I think Matt Ryan is going to be very efficient in this offense. I don't think they're going to put everything on him. The core of the offense is still going to come down to Jonathan Taylor, but because of what Jonathan Taylor offers, you've got just a more effective drop back passer than they had in Carson Wentz, and a guy that's going to be able to deliver off play action the way that he did with Kyle Shanahan. He doesn't have a Julio Jones, but watch out for Michael Pittman. That guy's going to be pretty good this year. So I think Matt Ryan's going to be very, very good. I would say nearly Pro Bowl level. Maybe miss out on that just due to the ridiculous talent of quarterbacks in the AFC, Mahomes, Herbert, Allen, Burrow, etc. But he'll be a pretty darn good quarterback, probably top 15 this season. And we've got DC Joker, who says, what do you think about the Raiders' record? I'm not really going to give that away just because I'm going to be doing that pretty soon in terms of record predictions and stuff. So I don't really want to give that away, but I do think the Raiders will be good. So there's your answer. Connor says, will the Chargers' offense or defense be better? That's a good question, and this was actually one of my bold predictions, so I'm going to give it away for Connor. I might even have to change it now, thanks to Connor. But my bold prediction for this season was that the Chargers' defense was going to outplay their offense, which I know that sounds crazy, which is why it's a bold, hot take. But I do think the Chargers' defense has a chance to be the best in the league this year. Then we've got the man himself, another Chargers fan, Ozma, who says, or is it asthma or Ozma? I don't know. He says, are the Chargers, it's not spelt like asthma, so I don't know. Are the Chargers the most entertaining team? I think based on last year, the most entertaining team to watch was the Raiders. I fell in love with watching the Raiders last year, which is why I love them so much this year. They had 5 overtime games. It was ridiculous. Every game they played was insane. So I think the Raiders were the most entertaining team last year, but the Chargers are certainly up there. I think they've probably, the weird thing about entertaining teams is you can't be so good, right? You can't be so good where you're dominant. You have to have some sort of weakness that makes you entertaining. That was the great part about the Raiders. I thought the Bengals were very entertaining last year because they had enough weaknesses where it made the games really competitive and fun to watch, but quarterbacks and stuff just went nuts. So I think that's most of the YouTube questions. I think I got one more here on the community tab, and then I'm going to get to you guys in the live comments. So just hold up 1 second. Busboy, 34 seconds ago, says, thoughts on the Steelers and their future. Thoughts on the Steelers and their future. I think it comes down to Kenny Pickett, Bus, and I think you know that. I think it depends how good Kenny Pickett is. And I think Kenny Pickett will be a solid quarterback. I don't think he's going to be anything special, but I do think he's going to be somebody that a strong organization like the Steelers can work with. I think the only question with Kenny Pickett comes down to how will he be able to play against good defenses in the tough weather that comes in Pittsburgh late in the year. That's my only question about him in Pittsburgh. But other than that, I feel like he's going to be somebody that's going to be a pretty average guy. I feel like, you know, he could have a number of seasons where he's about the 13th, 14th best quarterback in the league, and I think that's totally cool. As long as they continue to support him with playmakers, a good coach, a good defense, I don't think he needs to be like one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and I think you can have success with him. So I think the Steelers are always strong. Like their organization, the franchise, the culture, it's so strong. I can't doubt them moving into the future. Do I think they're going to be the best team in the NFL? Probably not, but they'll be in contention regularly because they try and they care, and there is a deep foundation of success within that franchise. Connor asks, who's the biggest breakout candidate on the Browns? The biggest breakout candidate on the Browns, I'm going to take a look at their roster here, the depth chart. Hold on 1 sec. Offensively, I mean, there's not really many candidates. I think David Njoku is certainly one, so let's put him in the back pocket. Defensively, JOK, I guess, is one. And then maybe one of the corners. Like I could see Greedy Williams or Greg Newsome having a big season this year, or both of them having a big season. I'm very high on them this year. I don't know what it is. I just feel like Greedy Williams is going to have a huge season. I don't really know why. And then I would say it's between Greedy Williams and David Njoku. That's going to be my answer for you there, Connor, for a breakout on the Browns. Anthony says, do you think a team like the Vikings, Cardinals, Eagles, or Niners could win 2 playoff games? So let's go through that list. I think all of those teams outside of the Cardinals, I think all of those teams except for the Cardinals can win 2 playoff games this year, and I wouldn't be surprised. I think the Niners, I could see that easily. The Vikings, I could also see that. And the Eagles, I could see that too. I mean, yeah, like, I think any of them, just put it this way, Anthony, if you had any of those teams in the NFC Championship, I wouldn't say like, no, you're stupid. Like, I wouldn't say that at all. Monty says, do you think the Lions have any chance at making the playoffs? And if so, what needs to go right for them? I think Jared Goff has to play like he did in 2018 for them to make the playoffs. Like, I think he needs to make more throws, like more plays. I think that's one thing that needs to happen. They've got to be better in the secondary than I expect them to be. I think so realistically, Jared Goff has to be more bold and willing to make plays, first and foremost. Second, DeAndre Swift has to be as advertised as a running back. Third, Jameson Williams has to come back, or one of two things. Jameson Williams or DJ Chark have to be a good number 1 outside receiver. The defense has to have a strong pass rush. I think that's far more likely of them having and producing a strong pass rush than it is them having a great coverage unit. So I'm going to say that their pass rush has to be really good. So it's got to be a blend between all of those things. They've got to be able to get to the quarterback. They've got to be able to play good quarterback, and they've got to be able to have some of their playmakers step up. Busboy says, should I promote this on the TikTok or is it too late? Don't worry about it now, but if anybody hasn't already, make sure that you do follow the TikTok. I've been producing like 2 videos a day on TikTok at this point. I do post some of them on Instagram if you haven't followed the Instagram as well, and I have posted some of them here on YouTube as shorts. But if you are not on TikTok for the BLV right now, I'm really focusing on building that up. So make sure to follow the Bottom Line View TikTok where I'm posting like twice a day. Maybe I think I posted 3 times yesterday. So Anthony says the 49ers and Eagles could be real good if their quarterbacks play well. I would agree with that. Singh says, Mitch, do you think the 49ers offense will be top 5 in 2022? I think they'll be top 10 just based on playmakers and scheme alone, but I don't know what Trey Lance is going to bring. So I think they're going to be an offense that's kind of somewhat inconsistent. I could see Trey Lance having some really awesome games and some games where he just can't hit a freaking target. So I feel like it's going to be kind of up and down, but somehow, some way, they'll make it to the top 10. By the way, Kyle Shanahan TikTok coming out probably tomorrow too. Winris says, what are your thoughts on the Bucs wide receiving core and offensive line after Julio Jones signing and Jensen's injury? So I'm going to be doing training camp power rankings pretty soon, and the Bucs are going to be in my top 3 pretty obviously. And part of it is just what I've seen from Julio in training camp has been very promising. I think if they don't have Chris Godwin early in the year, I think they're still going to produce a ton of points with Mike Evans, Russell Gage in the slot, and Julio out wide, along with everything else they bring. I'm not that worried about Ryan Jensen being out. I mean, I think people are far more worried than I am. I've seen Tom Brady win with a lot less on the offensive line. I mean, when you think about the Bucs offensive line, they have a Pro Bowl left tackle, the best right tackle in the league. I've never seen Tristan Wirfs have a bad game. Shaq Mason is awesome. And then left guard, okay, is a bit of a question mark. And that's where it compounds, right? Ryan Jensen's out, and now left guard's also a question. So how does that work out? I've heard that they might sign J.C. Treader. If they don't, I've already heard good reports about Rob Hainsey playing well against Vita Vea in training camp so far. So he's a second-year player too, so that's where you expect to jump. I believe he was like a 3rd-round pick, so I'm not too concerned there. I just feel like Brady has been able to overcome bad offensive lines many times. So I think that issue is kind of overblown, especially when you have a very good foundation of 3 Pro Bowl level players. So I'm not that worried. I mean, does it hurt them in certain matchups? Probably, but like not enough for me to be overly concerned. Big Al says, sup Mitch, how dominant will the Eagles front 7 be this season? I think it'll be very dominant, especially in terms of the run defense. I think that's where you're going to see the biggest impact for the Eagles is I think they should have a top 3 to 5 run defense in the NFL. Monty says, do you think the Ravens are serious contenders, or do you think they will just be good enough to make it maybe to the 2nd round, but that's their ceiling? No, I think the Ravens have a ceiling of going to the Super Bowl. I don't think their ceiling's capped on 2 playoff wins. It really comes down to the combination of how good their defense is and how good Lamar is this year. If Lamar turns into 2019 Lamar, they can win the Super Bowl. Their defense is pretty good, and we know they can play special teams, so I'm not worried about that. Do you believe that Teron Armstead from GSP, do you believe that Teron Armstead can help the other guys on the Dolphins offensive line improve, or do you think that the other guys on the line will fail to improve? I think having a better player on the offensive line helps them improve. I don't think there's any doubt about that. The question is, how healthy can Teron Armstead be? He's missed a few games over the last couple of years. How did I know that Julio was going to Tampa? I just had an educated guess. Do you prefer to build a defense from the trenches or from the back end, says Winris? I'm a bigger fan of secondary players, but I would say that if you have a dominant front 4, that's the best way to do it. It's just the most expensive way to do it too. So it comes down to money sort of deal. If you can get more value out of signing high-end corners and safeties, then that's the way I would go. Monty says, what do you think the X factor will be for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to make it to the Super Bowl? The secondary. I think if their secondary can come through and play the way it did in the Super Bowl run, and they can have consistency, because last year they were hurt a lot, and that's basically what the season came down to. And they only had one game, which was the divisional game versus the Rams, where they actually had all of the players in the secondary, which is crazy. So if they have their secondary intact, healthy, and playing well, then they're going to be tough because they can really stop the run well. And when you can stop the run well, puts a lot of teams in uncomfortable third downs. And if you can cover in zone and man coverage, then that's where you become a very good defense. The Bucs defense is their ultimate X factor. We know what we're getting out of Tom Brady. We know their offense is arguably the best in the sport. It comes down to the defense for me to win the Super Bowl. Nathaniel says, is the Seahawks going to be good soon? Probably not unless they get a quarterback next year. What are my thoughts on the Panthers? I feel like they are a very hard team to predict. I kind of see them as an average team. That's kind of how I see it. What are my thoughts on the Jets defense? I think they'll be tough. I think their front seven is very promising. Robert Saleh is always better with good front sevens. As long as their edge rush can be as good as it is on paper, that's really what the X factor for me is like, can Jermaine Johnson be an impact player as a rookie? Can Carl Lawson come back from this injury and produce? Like, if they can get an edge rush, that's where they could potentially be a lot better than people expect. Do I think Washington will make the playoffs? No. But do I think they have a chance to? Yeah. Can I explain my Murray, Lamar, Mahomes tweet on live? Yeah, sure. So what I tweeted was, and I have to read it because I don't even really remember exactly what I said. So let's go through it. So basically, Patrick Mahomes was complaining about people saying that, saying that he, like the ESPN reports, right? So Mahomes was saying it's funny that he, Lamar, and Kyler have to continually prove themselves, and I think some of it had to do with race and stuff like that, which I'm not going to get into. But basically what I said is there's a difference between having to prove yourself and having flaws. Everyone has flaws. So essentially what I'm saying is there's different levels to the conversation when it comes to Lamar, Kyler, and Mahomes. Mahomes is taking this as an offense, even though Mahomes just has to admit that sometimes you're not perfect at quarterback. Sometimes you have flaws. Every player has flaws. That's basically essentially what I'm saying about Mahomes is I think that I don't really understand where he's coming from because I feel like he's universally the most praised quarterback by far in the NFL. It's not even close. I don't think anybody is praised to the effect that Patrick Mahomes is praised, despite him having questionable results the last season. I felt like he was kind of overrated last year. So that's what I'm saying is, and I says Mahomes is an awesome player who reasonable analysts, who I'm basically saying myself, admit have flaws, okay? And then there's different levels. Lamar is somebody that plays really well, produces, has all these numbers, youngest MVP ever, unanimous MVP, all these wins, all this success, but Lamar is talked about like he can't throw the football or can't win any games. So that's the different levels, right? Lamar has been very successful, and despite that, he always has to prove himself. Mahomes is just a guy that people are critiquing a little bit, not by much. And Kyler is somebody that is good, but hasn't fully broken out. Like, he's good, but he hasn't, gotten to the status of Mahomes or Lamar, where you can say, like, this guy is certifiably absolutely a stud. Like, he hasn't had playoff success yet. He hasn't won a playoff game yet. He hasn't, had a string of seasons where he's been great. Like, I hope that makes sense. So, basically what I'm saying with Kyler is, he's been good, but there's still reason for people to be critical of him because he hasn't lived up to everything yet, right? Jake Patterson says, Kadarius Toney, top 15 receiver after this year. I'm going to say top 25. I don't know. That 15's a little bold, but I am huge on Kadarius Toney this year. I think he's going to be an absolute stud, and I'm taking him in every fantasy league possible. Sam Drip says, what are your thoughts on the Eagles? I think the Eagles are going to be great this year. I think they're going to be a playoff team. I think they're going to win their division, and I think they're dangerous depending on Jalen Hurts. Jackson says, what are your thoughts on Tom Brady? He's the GOAT. Absolutely the GOAT. No doubt. What are my thoughts on the Eagles' offense and defense? We'll get to the rankings when we get to them. I'm still going to do those rankings, offense rankings, defense rankings. But I think the offense is really well built around the quarterback. It really comes down to Jalen Hurts' progression as a passer. The defense, I'm suspect about in terms of the scheme and in terms of the pass defense a little bit, just because of how vanilla their pass defense was last year and how easy it was to throw the ball on them due to the fact that they weren't very creative. But I do think their run defense is going to be strong. And then what else do we got? I'm sorry about the lights today, guys. I got to change them or something. They're terrible. Monty says, what is your opinion on the Chiefs wide receiver room? I clicked that by accident. I should have been doing this the whole time. What are my thoughts on the Chiefs wide receiver room? Do you think that will be a huge loss losing Hill, or do you think the offense won't take a huge hit? I do think that the offense is going to take a hit. I don't think they're going to be as elite as they once were, as game-changing, as explosive as they once were. I do think they'll still be a good offense, though, because they have the best tight end, the best, one of the best schemers, one of the best quarterbacks, one of the best offensive lines. I think their running back room is better. And I think they're deeper weapons-wise. I am suspect, though, about the guys that they signed. I really like Sky Moore. I am not a big Juju fan, but I think he'll produce some. And then Valdez-Scantling is like a one-trick pony. I think he helps them clear the field for the other guys to get open, sort of deal. Monty says, what is your predictions for Garrett Wilson and Sauce? I think Sauce will be good as a rookie, but sort of inconsistent. And I think Garrett Wilson will be, I don't know. I want to say a little bit underwhelming for most people, because I think the real breakout for them offensively is going to be Elijah Moore. And I think Braxton Berrios is going to be more involved in terms of depth at receiver than people think, which I think is going to take away from Garrett Wilson. Jackson says, what do you think Tom Brady is going to play? What do you think Tom Brady is going to play like to? What? I don't understand this question. How old is he going to play to? So I'll just answer that part. I think he is going to play until the end of this year and then retire. Don says, Nicholas, the world is laughing at Chicago's roster is horrible. Monty says, where do you rank the Vikings receiving room? I really like the top three. Yes, I agree. I love the top three. It really depends on Thielen's health, though, which is the X factor. I think they're probably in the top 10. Singh says, Mitch, do you think the Texans are the worst team in the NFL? I do not. Caesar says, what do the Cowboys need to do to make the playoffs considering the Eagles and company? I think their defense has to be as good as they were last year at turning the ball over, or they just have to be more consistent as a defense in terms of giving up plays. Like, I think their defense has to perform, because I think their offense is going to take a step back, obviously, due to the loss of weapons. Afix says, what do you think about Lance and Shanahan as a coach-quarterback duo? Do you think Kyle can elevate the offense in the beginning of the year to overcome some of Trey's early hiccups? I think so. I mean, I think the interesting thing about Trey Lance as quarterback of the Niners is going to be how Kyle can come into the season with something that teams have never seen before, which whenever you have Kyle Shanahan with something that teams have never seen before, it's going to be dangerous, because he's going to have plays that is going to just be open and work and be, attack defenses in a way that they haven't seen with Jimmy Garoppolo. So I think it's going to take a little bit of time for defenses to catch up to Trey Lance, because I think Trey Lance, despite his flaws, can do some things that Jimmy can't do, especially when it comes to throwing the ball down the field and running. So those two things I think are going to make up for the potential loss in the short and intermediate passing game, which is where Jimmy thrived. And I expect somebody like Brandon Ayuk to have a big year this year, especially early, where I feel like teams are going to have to, really early in the season, expect a lot of Debo, expect a lot of Kittle. But I think Ayuk is going to be that guy getting those matchups where Shanahan's going to be calling these plays for deep shots, and Ayuk is the guy that can benefit most off of that. I also think they're going to lean on the running game pretty heavily this year. GSP says, do you think the Cowboys will keep Zeke and re-sign Schultz? They're getting rid of Zeke as soon as they can. I do think they'll re-sign Schultz, though. Jackson says, what are your thoughts on Kenny Pickett and the Steelers? I think Mitch Trubisky is going to be the quarterback this year. My thoughts on Kenny Pickett are, I think he's going to be a solid NFL quarterback. Nothing special, but solid starter. And I think the Steelers this year will miss the playoffs, be a solid team, but not good enough to make it. Tyler says, what's up, Mitch? This isn't a question, but do you see Ryan Jensen's knee injury as a huge loss? I kind of already answered this, but I'm just going to say I don't think it's as big of a loss as people are making it out to be. I think a lot of people are overreacting. First, I think Rob Hainsey is going to be a solid player in the NFL as a mid-round draft pick at center, and I think that he is going to break out sort of in his second year if need be. I have seen that if they're not comfortable with him, that they'll probably sign J.C. Tretter, who's a good center, who just hasn't found a home yet, but was a top 10 center for the Browns. And then if that doesn't happen, it means they like Hainsey. So that's first and foremost. Secondly, Tom Brady overcomes offensive lines. So he makes the offensive line better than it is usually. Monty says, how far of a leap do you think Mac Jones takes in year 2? And do you think Mac will be the reason that they make or don't make the playoffs? I think that he will be the reason they make it if they do. But I think if they don't make it, it will more likely be because rather we don't see any uptick in production from the receiving core, or the defense plays bad. If the defense is just bad, which is possible, then I don't think they're going to make the playoffs regardless. So I think that the X factor is not only Mac breaking out, but the defense being stable. I think that, how big will the leap be? I think that he's going to be considered by pretty much everybody. So I think the consensus is going to be that Mac Jones is a top 15 quarterback by the end of the year. And I think some people will put him in the top 10. Jackson says, do you think Tom Brady is going to be traded to the New York Giants? No. Singh says, Mitch, do you think the Giants will win more than 7 games? It's a possibility, but I think I have them winning about 7 games. Their schedule is very easy. That helps. Do I believe that Dorrance Armstrong can be at least a half-decent replacement? I think it's going to be a replacement, not a replacement. I think it's going to be a rotation, Caesar. So I feel like you're going to see some Basham, you're going to see some Armstrong, you're going to see some Fowler. I think pretty much, DeMarcus Lawrence is going to have his role locked down on one side, and then you're going to see Parsons play on the edge sometimes. You're going to see Dante Fowler play there. You're going to see Armstrong on early downs, most likely, and then I feel like they're going to rotate in guys like Fowler and guys like Basham when they need a pass rush. So I feel like their edge position is actually solid, despite losing Gregory. I don't think that's really the biggest of their worries. What I'm really worried about more so with their defense is the interior defensive line and the corner position. Their corners are just really inconsistent. And the interior defensive line is just not very good. I mean, Neville Gallimore, we'll see what he is. He hasn't really shown anything. They don't really have any studs here. Like Tristan Hill was a second-round pick. He's been whatever. Carlos Watkins is whatever. Like, they don't have anybody that's a stud. So they have studs elsewhere. They have DeMarcus Lawrence. They have Micah Parsons. They have... even I would say Trevon Diggs and Jaron Kearse. are pretty good players. So, like, they've got a solid defense. Like, I don't think it's going to be a bad defense. I just wonder about certain areas there. And then offensively, I haven't really talked about the Cowboys very much. But offensively, I'm just a little bit worried about, you know, can Dak elevate guys like James Washington and Jalen Tolbert? I'm worried about the period without Michael Gallup because I feel like too much pressure is going to be on CeeDee Lamb to make plays. Freaking lights. I'm sorry. Anyways, Jackson says, do you think Rob Gronkowski is going to unretire? I don't think so, honestly. I don't think so. Josh Allen wasn't considered. This is going into a Tua question. Here's the difference, GSP. I always saw talent in Josh Allen. High upside talent. If Tua breaks out, it's going to be like he's going to be like the 16th or 15th best quarterback. I don't think Tua can ever get to the point of being an elite quarterback. He doesn't have the talent. That's just my opinion. I could be wrong totally. But I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to say that Tua, based on his skill set, could be a top 5 quarterback. All right, guys, I'm going to end it there. I think I answered quite a few questions about pretty much every team. I might have missed a few, but this was mostly a Q&A session, which I appreciate, and thank you guys so much for joining. If you did enjoy, don't forget to Gronk spike the like button, and if you haven't already, guys, make sure that you do sign up for Underdog Fantasy. I have been promoting it throughout the offseason. I just did a draft earlier on Best Ball Mania 3, which is their biggest tournament going on this summer. They're giving out not only a $2 million winner for first, but a $1 million winner for second. So if you consider yourself a fantasy football player, I would definitely check it out. Use the promo code BLV when you sign up, and they'll double your first deposit up to $100. So make sure to check out Underdog Fantasy. Link is in the description. Thank you guys so much. I'm going to try to stream a lot more. I was almost thinking of an idea of doing training camp streams, like almost like training camp news live and talking about the latest news every day sort of deal for a bit. So I'm thinking about doing that just to have a consistent stream going on and consistent content for you guys throughout August. But a lot of content is coming for August. This is NFL season now, so I'm ready to go. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you soon. Peace.